Hi, I'm Devin Shutte from the Rebbe Group, and we're here at the North Coast Courier. I've got the opportunity to ask Cobus Oelofse from the iLembe Chamber of Commerce a few questions on what has really been raising a lot of headlines recently, and that's around the municipal budget and the mayoral imbizo that got quite heated at some elements. So what we're going to do today is we're going to unpack it for you, what it means for you. We're going to look at things, how the revenue is being spent. We're going to look at tariffs. We're going to look at governance, and then we're going to bring it back and see, how the community at large can kind of agitate for positive change there. So, Cobus, great as always to chat to you about these type of things. Maybe just to start, how would you rate our municipality in the greater scheme of things? We know that local governments in general tend to struggle. We know the Auditor General finds many qualified audits, but your impression engaging with the municipality so regularly and business on the other side, how well are they doing? And obviously, are there big areas of improvement?
Thanks, Dev. It's a bit of a poison chalice after the Izimbizo last week. Look, in terms of, I think like any other local municipality in the country, we do have our challenges. I think there's probably over the recent past, some real political infighting and instability that we probably can do without. But I think this happened in the majority of local municipalities in the country, where these turf wars do take place. I think we probably fortunate in our region is at operational level within the municipality, at political leadership as well, despite those turmoil, a willingness to engage with the business community. We've got regular engagements, but I also think at an operational management level, a willingness and a responsiveness from administrative staff within the municipality to engage with the business community, recognize the importance of the local economy to the well-being of the municipality, and constructively engage with the business community via the chamber.
I think that's so important because it's a social compact, right? It's not just local governments, and it's not just business, and it's not just the citizens. It's all of us figuring out how do we engage constructively together. And I think there's nothing that focuses the mind more than a budget and where the funds have gone. So maybe we can jump into that, and just some of your comments initially on the revenues. How does that revenue look at a municipal level? What are the trends there? What did you pick up that was maybe a little bit concerning that we can go into?
I think that that was probably the main discussion point in the building up to the Izimbizo, was the makeup of the revenue sources for the budget. Maybe just a reminder as well is that there are really only three components that constitute revenue in the municipal budget. The first one is obviously own funds that are generated through the municipality through the delivery of services or the selling of services to ratepayers. The second one is grants that are given at national level, and obviously the third one would be any loans. The big talking point was obviously around the electrical department deficit in terms of the amount of bulk electrical purchases and how much we actually selling on. There's a budgeted deficit of 161 million for 2025-2026, which is obviously hugely concerning. But I also need to add that 2 years ago, in the actual annual financial statements, that was more than double that amount.
So the trend is in the right direction.
The trend is in the right direction.
But not where we need it to be yet.
Definitely not. And I also think what is concerning, and I think is concerning for all municipalities, is that if that is your biggest revenue source in terms of the vulnerability around that, especially with new technology coming in like solar, independent power producers, as to what extent does that undermine your biggest municipal revenue source. We, in the budget submission from the Chamber, we've acknowledged the concerns around the electrical functions deficit. I think we're fortunate from a Chamber point of view that we work very, very closely with the Electrical Directorate in terms of how do we address some of these concerns, not only in terms of network reliability, but also in terms of how that contributes to the selling of electricity and people being willing to pay for that. So 3 years ago, as part of the Rutela project, a project was established to pursue non-revenue electricity. There was an action plan, and it's a project that is live at the moment. The project is being managed by an exceptionally reputable private entity, corporate, that is managing the non-revenue work stream. And we've identified 16 elements that we need to address with targets over a 5-year period. Now, I think what we need to do is, as we mentioned in our budget submission, is that we need to go and review those targets, because at the moment we're trying to reduce by 2% per annum, so 10% over 5 years, which might not be adequate in terms of the NERSA threshold. But those 16 areas, I think good progress are being made in terms of those 16 action points that we try. And those differ from financial to technical interventions, from strategic interventions, but also socially, in terms of engaging with communities, to say that if you're going to consume electricity, please pay for it, because it puts unnecessary pressure on the municipality and other functions within the municipality. So from that point of view, I think there's an action plan in place, there's a project in place. What we would like to see, and once again a recommendation from the iLembe Chamber point of view, is that we would like to see that action plan with the targets being included in the performance contracts of all the executive team.
Yes.
But specifically the municipal manager and the ED, for the executive director for electrical services, is to make sure there's a bigger and a stated commitment around achieving those targets, especially considering the rhetoric about the vulnerability around electrical losses. I just need to add to that as well, though, is that in terms of electrical non-revenue, I think it's just one of those components where the municipality is vulnerable from a revenue point of view. It unfortunately also extends into areas where households are excluded from rates or excluded from refuge charges merely because they reside in what is considered an indigent geographical area that is considered indigent in terms of the threshold and the means test for what indigent means, are excluded from being able to, or paying rates and paying for services like refuge removal. So I think in addition to electricity, we also need to look at supporting the municipality and making sure that that level of detail and granularity is exposed, and make sure that households and businesses, etc., that can afford to pay rates and can afford to pay for their refuge removal, that they actually do it. So this is not only about the electrical deficit. The second component that I think is quite relevant from a revenue point of view is that obviously, I don't need to, you've spoken about it quite often through the Rebecca group, about the national budget. Yes. And the pressure that the national budget is under. And I think a consequence of that is that the expectations that we've got at local municipal level, that those grants will be forthcoming. All of a sudden there's some doubt about grant funding, the level of grant funding that would be made available, etc. So I think that's a concern for the Chamber. And I think especially in relation to if that's not happening, how are we going to fund repairs and maintenance, and how are we going to fund capital projects? one of the observations that we've made in our budget submission is that we believe that a critical infrastructure grant application was made, a significant grant application to support the electrical function in terms of its capex and the repairs and maintenance budget. The unfortunate reality is that if that grant the application is not successful, there's no money being made, provided for in the budget, which we believe is a significant vulnerability. Also, just from a business community point of view, obviously repairs and maintenance, especially around roads and some of our commercial and tourism nodes. Obviously, I need to recognize as well that there are some significant budget allocations being made for Saltrock Main Beach, upgrades, the bridge at Saltrock Main Beach, and similar to the Thompson's Bay Pool Beach area. So we need to recognize that. But unfortunately, there's also a lot of areas that, commercial areas, tourism nodes, that needs road resurfacing, where we need to attend to stormwater drainage that does not feature in the budget, which is a huge concern from a business community point of view. In terms of maybe just a last observation around revenue, is that one of the points that I made to the Deputy Mayor at the Isembizo is that we also need to be realistic and transparent around the budget. Now, the budget makes provision for a 161% increase in cash reserves. And obviously, there's a desire, if not an obligation, to see how we can replenish some of the cash reserves that were eaten up, especially after the adjustment budget. But I think the unfortunate reality is that, first of all, is that realistic? Are we going to be able to achieve 161% contribution to cash reserves? And the second thing is that, especially when it comes to grant funding, the replenishment being made from grant funding, is that replenishment will come at the expense of repairs and maintenance and capital expenditure, because we're pursuing the cushion that we feel comfortable with. And I do think we need to get a better balance there in terms of, yes, let's make provision for the cash reserves, let's be realistic about that, but not at the expense of the repairs and maintenance that are desperately needed with regards to road infrastructure, electrical infrastructure, as well as capex in those two areas.
So Cobus, that point around capital expenditure, I think is critical, because that's really what drives economic growth, and at national level or local government level. And until you're investing in significant assets in enough proportion of it, so whether it's roads, bridges, electrical infrastructure, water infrastructure, that doesn't drive, that investment ultimately drives growth, it drives employment. So if you're under allocating on that, which it sounds like they are doing because of the deficits in the revenue, that becomes a long-term problem. And if we don't get these national grants coming down to help with our electrical infrastructure, that creates long-term problems while the municipality is desperately trying to solve these short-term issues. So I think that's something as residents we all need to be watching very, very closely, is what proportion of that budget, what you just said, is going into capital expenditure, these big projects, and just the maintenance of the infrastructure we already have.
And with the work that the Chamber is doing, especially with the Department of Transport at provincial level, as well as SANRAL at the national level, this is not a local government unique problem. I do think that a point that we make in our submission is that we need to brush up on our supply chain management processes in terms of holding subcontractors responsible,
yes.
Who signs off on projects that have not been concluded or concluded to the standard that is expected. And I think if there is one vulnerability that I think is acknowledged and recognized by the municipality as well, is their ability to manage big capital projects. And the Chamber has always extended, similar to what we're doing with the electrical directorate at the moment, with the technical task team for electricity. We work very, very closely with KwaDukuza's municipalities' electrical operational team. Is that in terms of delivering some of these big capex projects, rely on the private sector to support you and help you out in that regard, and let's spend the money. But there's also some very, very valid reasons often why some of the money is not being spent. For example, the grant funding, the disaster grant funding of over R1 billion was received 4 months before the end of the financial year. To expect people to spend over R1 billion in 4 months is also a tough target. So, those are the little nuances that we don't want to give too much sympathy to.
Sure. But I think what I'm hearing you saying is that the municipality has at times been let down by poor contractors. And I think the opportunity to try vet contractors, the ones that have been able to deliver, need to be highlighted, and the ones that have poor track records need to be taken up.
And at all spheres of government, we're sitting with the P103, with a subcontractor, and it's a small contract, but just not capable to deliver the project. And that extends all over. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that, Cobus. Let's move to tariffs. I think this is very important because this affects all our pockets. Maybe just take us through the proposed tariffs in the budget. What we do know is that in South Africa, we're sitting at a very low inflation environment. We're sitting at around 3%, which in theory is great, but it doesn't help if your municipal rates and levies are a lot higher than that. So what's proposed and what can we do about it?
With regards to tariffs, I think let's just highlight 3 areas. First of all, electricity. The second one would be refuge removal, and then the last one would be around the rates. I think those are probably the most significant tariffs. Just from an interest point of view, going through the tariff of charges, there's a few adjustments in terms of thresholds that we advocated for, that we need to acknowledge, that were considered and built in, obviously all subject to NERSA approval. But the second one, which is quite interesting, is that for the first time ever, the tariff of charges for the electrical element function includes embedded generators and embedded generation, and feedback systems and payments for those and tariffs for those. And the second one would be wheeling. Interesting times where we are in terms of. Now, the NERSA application makes provision for 10.7%. I don't think there would be a significant concern about whether that would be approved or not. I think it will probably be approved by NERSA. And I think the point that you made is that it's all relevant to CPI. And, sitting at 10.7%, CPI sitting at 3, maybe 3.5, if you really want to push it, is a significant concern. But I must say, one of the municipalities that always do their submissions in terms of the cost of supply studies is the KwaDukuza's municipality, and that's where it came out. And we just need to rely on NERSA, that will make a sound judgment there. With regards to refuge removal, it was just over 7%. So once again, double CPI.
That's high,
yeah. And then I think one of the observations that we made in our budget submission is that the municipality also needs to be transparent. And I think it's something that I've mentioned earlier, is that in the rates increases, it's indicated that there's no rate increase, but that the rebate would reduce from 25% to 18%.
Yes.
So obviously, we need the municipality needs to be upfront as well. So
that's an effective rate increase, right?
It is, and it's an effective rate increase of 9.33%.
Okay.
And I think if you take those 3 very broad rates categories, all of them are significantly higher than CPI, and we've requested the municipality to review and re-look at the level of tariffs in that regard.
Okay, all right, that's good. And you mentioned transparency there, Cobus. So let's shift over to the last section that I wanted us to cover today, and that's governance. Critical, often in short supply, but maybe you can just speak to how you see governance in our local municipality and maybe where there's some areas of improvement.
Yeah, and I think we've covered quite a few of the governance issues.
Yes.
Right, for example, supply chain, signing off on projects, value for money, all of those elements that are dependent on sound governance structures and sound judgment from municipal leadership and municipal administrative staff. I think probably the elephant in the room, and I said this at the Zimbizo as well, was that very little was mentioned about the 36 odd million rand that was stolen or attempt to steal from the municipal bank account. Now, what we need to reflect on is that this municipality is a 3 billion rand business. If you run a 3 billion rand business, and if you look at recent studies that came out from Alliance, for example, that rates cyber security as the biggest risk to business in the country, even higher than overtaking the original political instability and load shedding, etc. And where we find ourselves. And then I go and have a look at the budget and have a look at how we respond from a governance point of view to the fact that somebody has stolen or attempted to steal 36.5 million odd rand out of the bank account. We found no indication in the budget of strengthening and providing more capacity in internal audit, and whether that's internal audit in general or supporting the internal audit department and function in isolation. In terms of IT security, we couldn't find any indication of that. In terms of conducting IT systems audits, those are the type of responses that, if that's the biggest risk and you felt the brunt of that risk by somebody stealing that type of money, those are the type of responses that we would have expected in the budget, and unfortunately it's not in there. Once again, unfortunately, what is in there is that the consequence of this lapse of system security is that external investigations have gone up from 1.5 million rand to 12 million rand. And us as ratepayers and business ratepayers having to fund investigations into something that probably could have been prevented if we had the right systems in place. And that's another plea from the business community side in terms of security and securing our systems, is to make sure that those systems are put in place and that we've got the capacity to manage the complexity, especially from an IT point of view, of a business of 3 billion rand turnover.
Okay. So Cobus, we've spoken about the municipality, we've spoken about the revenue that comes from these multiple sources, and some of it a little bit uncertain, but there's definitely still the ability to deliver the services that the community needs. We spoke about the tariffs that we feel are quite high relative to inflation and how that could go, and we've also spoken about governance and how there are definitely areas where that could be addressed and improved in that regard. So kind of to bring this all to a close, and to the listeners, people in the business community and the ordinary citizens, how can they come alongside and partner our local government who, you mentioned there's a layer within there that really is willing to collaborate and working hard, but it is a difficult task. How should we be thinking about this collaboration as businesses to be able to get the desired outcomes that not only the municipality but that we both need, and we get value for money in what we're paying into the municipality?
Look, Dev, and I think especially in these times where the emotions run high, the message from the chamber point of view is not always that palatable in terms of the remit and the mandate that I've got as a Chamber of Commerce, is that we committed to constructive engagement with the municipality. We committed to fulfill our role as a social partner, as in a social compact, and make sure that, and this is something that came very, very strongly through, and is also part of our submission from the IDP that is supposed to be funded by this budget is private-public sector collaboration. And we would like to, as the private sector and representatives of the private sector, see how we can support the municipality. I think there needs to be a response in terms of the reassurance. And that's maybe something that I just want to highlight as well. I thought that at the Zimbizo, there was a lot of talk about the demanding of respect. And I think all of us probably would like to receive a bit of respect in terms of the way we engage with the municipality. But I think from a business community, there's further two emotions that there's an expectation of, that I want to say to the mayor and to the deputy mayor and to the municipal manager and all of these EDs. This is not only about respect. This is also about your ability to give the business sector, the private sector, hope, but most importantly, confidence that we can invest our money in this local municipality and we know that it will be taken care of.
Brilliant. And as they say, confidence is the cheapest form of stimulus. So we'll leave it there. Cobus, thank you for your insights. Thank you for all you and the Chamber do as really the tip of the spear for the business community and this collaboration with local government. And we look forward to tracking the changes and the progress that we've spoken about.
Thanks, Devin. Thanks so much.